when his sick little boy pointed at a woman in a boardroom and said, "That's Mommy," David's heart stopped, and so did time. The fluorescent lights of St. Anne's Children's Hospital hummed faintly, casting their pale glow along the corridor where David Brooks carried his 5-year-old son, Caleb. The boy's body was light in his arms, too light for his age, and wrapped in faded Superman pajamas that once fit loosely but now clung to his thin frame. His head rested on David's shoulder, his eyes half-lidded with exhaustion, but still holding that spark of innocence that hadn't yet been dimmed by sickness. David's boots echoed softly on the polished floor. He was 37, a construction worker by trade, a single father by circumstance, and a man who looked older than his years. Deep lines carved themselves into his face, not from age but from worry, sleepless nights, and the heavy burden of keeping his son alive while bills stacked like bricks against him. Caleb shifted slightly and whispered into his father's ear, his breath warm but weak. "Daddy, do you think the doctors will fix me this time?" David tightened his hold, forcing a calm smile he didn't feel. "They'll do everything they can, champ. You're the strongest boy I know." He said the words as though they could shield his son from reality, but his chest ached. Caleb's illness, a rare blood disorder, was treatable, but required expensive medication and constant hospital visits. Insurance covered only fragments of the cost, and David's savings had dried up months ago. He had sold his tools, borrowed from friends, skipped meals, and taken every extra shift offered, but it was never enough. Tonight, Caleb's fever had spiked dangerously high, and David had rushed him here, praying the emergency room would admit him without demanding payment up front. The corridor stretched long ahead of them, but as they turned a corner, something unexpected caught Caleb's eye. Through a wall of glass, the boys spotted a brightly lit boardroom inside the administrative wing of the hospital. Men and women in sharp suits sat around a long polished table, their pens moving quickly, their conversations brisk and controlled. At the head of the table stood a woman in a navy skirt and a crisp white blouse, her hair swept neatly into a bun, her presence commanding the room with an ease that came only from authority. Caleb's head lifted from David's shoulder, his small hand stretched outward, his finger pointing toward the glass. His voice, though faint, carried a certainty that startled his father. "Daddy, that's Mommy." David froze mid-step. For a second, he wondered if the fever was making Caleb delirious, but the boy's gaze remained steady, his expression certain. His little finger stayed fixed on the woman behind the glass, as though he had uncovered a secret the world had overlooked. "Caleb," David whispered carefully, "that's not Mommy. She's not here." But Caleb shook his head with the stubbornness only a child could manage. "I remember her. I remember her voice, her smell. That's Mommy." David's throat tightened. His son was barely a year old when Naomi, his mother, had walked out of their lives. She hadn't left a note or an explanation, only silence that stretched into years. David had tried to shield Caleb from the truth, but the boy sometimes asked questions David never had the heart to answer. He had buried the anger, the abandonment, the betrayal. He had raised his son alone, never expecting to see her again. And yet David's eyes shifted reluctantly toward the boardroom. The woman at the head of the table gestured gracefully as she spoke. To the other executives, her voice muffled by the glass. Her posture was polished, her expression controlled, but there was something about her face, the curve of her jaw, the faint tilt of her eyes. Memories stirred in David's chest like a long-forgotten song. Could it be possible? As if sensing the weight of his stare, the woman glanced up mid-sentence. Her eyes scanned the hallway casually, then stopped. Her gaze locked on Caleb, then on David. Her lips parted slightly. For the briefest moment, her confident expression fractured. Shock flickered across her face. Guilt followed. Recognition came last. The executives turned their heads, puzzled by her silence, but she didn't notice them. She excused herself abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor as she pushed away from the table. Without waiting for questions, she strode toward the glass doors. David's heart thundered in his chest. He wanted to move, to turn, to vanish into the endless maze of hospital corridors before the past could collide with the present. But his legs betrayed him. He stood frozen, Caleb still in his arms, his son's finger still pointing toward the approaching figure. The doors swung open and the woman stepped out. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile floor. Her scent familiar, haunting, drifted into the air between them. She stopped just a few feet away, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. Her lips trembled as she whispered his name. David. The sound of it knocked the air from his lungs. He hadn't heard her voice in 5 years, yet here it was smooth, steady, and cracked with regret. He stared at her, his jaw tightening, his own voice low and heavy. Naomi. At the sound of her name, Caleb wriggled in his father's arms, reaching out eagerly toward the woman, his face lit up with joy so pure it pierced, the tension like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Mommy!" Caleb cried, and in that instant, Naomi's carefully crafted facade shattered. The woman who had just commanded a room full of powerful executives was gone. In her place was a mother collapsing under the weight of love and guilt. Tears spilled freely as she dropped to her knees before her son, reaching trembling hands toward him. "Caleb," she whispered, her voice breaking, "my baby." Naomi's hands shook as she reached for Caleb, though she hesitated as if terrified he might reject her. But Caleb leaned forward, his little arms stretching toward her without hesitation. David's chest clenched at the sight. His son had no memory of abandonment, no record of sleepless nights without her. To him she was simply Mommy. "Daddy, let me go," Caleb whispered, tugging at his father's shirt. "I want Mommy." David's jaw locked. For 5 long years he had raised this boy alone. Through the endless bills, the tears, the nights Caleb cried for a mother who never came. He had fought, begged, and sacrificed to keep him alive. And now, with one word, one smile, she had returned to reclaim a place she had long since abandoned. "You don't get to walk back in and be his mother," David said coldly. Naomi flinched at the ice in his voice, but her eyes never left Caleb. "I know I don't deserve it," she whispered. "But please, let me hold him." David looked down at his son. Caleb's wide brown eyes, pleading and certain, disarmed his anger. Slowly, reluctantly, David lowered Caleb into Naomi's waiting arms. The boy melted into her embrace as though no time had passed. He nestled against her chest, breathing deeply, and Naomi clung to him as though she could absorb the years she had lost. "I knew you'd come back," Caleb murmured sleepily. "I remembered you, Mommy." Tears poured down Naomi's face. She rocked him gently, her composure gone. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered into his hair. David's hands curled into fists at his sides. Memories of nights pacing the floor with a feverish child, of skipped meals so Caleb could eat, of working himself to exhaustion to pay for medicine. Memories Naomi hadn't been there for Rose like a storm in his chest. "Why now?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp. "Why here, Naomi? You left us without a word. Do you know how many nights he cried for you? Do you know what it's like to hold your child? Well, he asks where Mommy is, and you have no answer?" Naomi winced with each word, as though they were blows. She looked up, guilt shining in her eyes. "I was drowning, David. I thought I wasn't good enough. I told myself Caleb would be better off without me. I thought if I walked away, you'd find someone stronger, someone better than me." David's voice cracked with fury. "Better without you." He didn't need better. He needed his mother. The words echoed through the hallway, and for a moment all 3 of them were suspended in silence. Then Caleb's small hand reached out and touched David's cheek. His eyes, round and innocent, looked between them both. "Daddy, don't be mad," he said softly. "She's here now. Maybe she can help." David's throat tightened. How could a child, sick and fragile, still carry such hope? Naomi looked down at Caleb's IV line, at the hospital bracelets circling his wrist. Her tears gave way to a new kind of determination. "What's wrong with him?" she asked, her voice trembling. David exhaled heavily. "A rare blood disorder. The treatments are expensive." "Too expensive?" Naomi's arms tightened around her son. "Then let me help," she said firmly. "I have the resources, David. I sit on this hospital's board. I can get him the best specialists, the best care. Please let me fight for him with you." David studied her face. For the first time, he didn't see the ambitious young woman who had once walked away. He saw a mother, raw with regret, but fierce with resolve. Still, doubt gnawed at him. "Money doesn't erase the years you abandoned him," he said quietly. Naomi shook her head. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm here to stay. Not just for Caleb, but for you too, if you'll let me. Let me start over, David. Let me be the mother he deserves." Caleb stirred in her arms, his little voice barely a whisper. "Families help each other when someone's sick. Families stay together." The words pierced through David's defenses. Slowly, his shoulders sank, the weight of years pressing down. He met Naomi's gaze, and in her eyes he saw not perfection, not certainty, but a genuine desire to make things right. Weeks passed, and Naomi kept her promise. She poured her wealth into Caleb's care, bringing in top doctors, funding treatments, even creating a foundation to help other families. But what mattered more was her presence. She came to every appointment, sat by Caleb's bed when fevers returned, read bedtime stories, and learned to administer his medicine. David watched as Caleb's trust in her grew, and slowly, against his will, he began to trust her too. 6 months later, a doctor smiled as he delivered the news they had prayed for. "Caleb is in remission." Naomi covered her face, sobbing with relief. David hugged his son tightly, his heart lighter than it had been in years. As they left the hospital hand in hand, Naomi on one side, David on the other, Caleb looked up and said proudly, "I told you that was Mommy. I never forgot her." Naomi knelt and kissed his forehead. "And I never forgot you, sweetheart. Not for a single day." David looked at them both and felt something shift inside him. Forgiveness didn't come in an instant, but it was possible. And sometimes a child's faith was stronger than the bitterness adults carried. Sometimes the people who leave us aren't gone because they don't love us, but because they don't yet know how to love. True love doesn't vanish. It waits for the right moment to return. And when it does, forgiveness can turn broken pieces into a stronger family than before. Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe.